So we have technology at work here. We're trying to stream this through Facebook and through other means so that people can join us on their handhelds or from their computer at home. We did the same thing last night. We got some questions via the Facebook and social media, which Renee and Addison will be monitoring as we go forward. My name is Stuart Osgood. I work for DOWL, and DOWL is under contract to the Department of Transportation to update a 21-year-old bike and pedestrian statewide plan for the state of Alaska. So the last one was done in the early 90s, completed in 1995, and it's been 21 years, and a lot has changed. A lot has changed in Alaska, a lot has changed technologically. I think we have seen a wave sweep across the country of increased interest in non-motorized use of our right-of-ways, the vulnerable users, if you will, and making accommodations for all of them, whether they be kids traveling to school or people out exercising or just those that are completing short trips on their bikes or walking. So this is the second open house. Last night we were at East High School in Anchorage. We had about 40 or 50 people that showed up there, and we gave them the same basic presentation that we're going to show you tonight, just to get the discussion going. So I mentioned that I'm from DOWL. Also, that symbol on the bottom is ALTA. ALTA is a national and, in fact, international bike and pedestrian planning firm. We're working out of with their offices out of Portland and Seattle, and they are a sub-consultant to us. They've completed a lot of work in Canadian provinces as well as the northern tier states, and they're going to bring that nationwide expertise to our team and help us take the lessons learned in other northern climates and apply them here in Anchorage, in Alaska. So with that, tonight we'll go through a safety moment. We'll do some introductions, talk about the purpose of the project and what the plan is and is not, what policies are currently in place, what we've done over the last couple, 3 months, and then some next steps. And then hopefully we can have a hearty dialogue of question and answers and get some feedback from you folks on what we should be considering as we move forward. Safety moment. It seemed apropos that we would talk a little bit about trail use and safety when using the trails. I'm sure that you folks have heard that there's been some unfortunate incidences occur on the trail system in Anchorage, and so I thought we'd just remind people that if you're out and about, you can keep yourself a bit more safe by avoiding trails after dark, and of course with our shrinking daylight hours, maybe lighted trails, or make sure that you have proper lighting as you're walking or biking. Take somebody along with you, let others know where you're going. Carry a cell phone. We have pretty good cell phone coverage now in most of the states, particularly on the rail belt. Wear reflective clothing. This is my pet peeve. A lot of folks riding with headphones and earbuds on, and really are not aware of what's going on around them, whether there's a critter behind them or some human with bad intentions. So make sure you're using all of your senses. Be alert, avoid unfamiliar and secluded areas, and be prepared. Some people carry noisemakers or pepper spray or other protection, and just make sure that you are doing what you view as safe in your particular instance. So just some reminders if you're out and about to hopefully keep yourself safe. So the team that we have here is just quick introductions. We have Marquita Moulton. Marquita's from Statewide in Juneau, and she's the project manager from DOT's perspective. And we also have Addison and Renee down front. Addison is the public involvement lead, and Renee is the planner for us. We also have reached out and assembled a steering committee that will be involved throughout the project. And we've tried to be all-inclusive, both regionally, pedestrians, bikes, various urban and rural, health institutions like Providence and the Alaska Native Medical Center, youth advocates. We tried to be kind of all-encompassing and make sure that we're pulling in all corners of the state so that this doesn't become an Anchorage plan or a Wasilla plan or a Juneau plan. It includes the entire state, which we all know is diverse and has very different needs. So a lot of folks at the table that hopefully will make sure we're addressing the needs of all Alaskans. The purpose of what we're going to end up with is to improve the safety, accessibility, and to promote healthy lifestyles in our communities. We want a safe and efficient bicycle and pedestrian network and the infrastructure to encourage walking and cycling. We have some national guidance from the Federal Highway Administration and others on what this plan needs to include and what it should include. And I just wanted to read you quickly there's 4 points to the National Strategic Agenda for Peds and Bikes. It includes improving the networks. It includes increasing safety. Equity means that regardless of socioeconomic status, we have equity of access to non-motorized facilities. And then encourage more trips over the next 20 to 30 years. And they actually have set a couple of fairly aggressive national goals for us as a country. An 80% reduction in 15 years of pedestrian and vehicle deaths. So right now, about 35,000 people die on our road systems in this country, and about 6,000 of them are either pedestrians or bicyclists. So a rather sizable percentage of them, particularly on the ped end, about 5,000 pedestrians in 2015 and about 1,000 cyclists. And then you've all probably heard of Vision Zero. The goal is in 30 years to get to 0 pedestrians and bicyclists killed on our roadways in 30 years. So that's at the federal level. They also want to increase our short trip modes from 20%. So short trips are defined as walking trips less than a mile and bike trips less than 5 miles. So they want to increase that in the proportion of those trips, short trips that are done by bike or walking, from 20% to 30%. So some pretty aggressive goals, a 50% increase in people choosing to walk and bike over a 15-year period. So in Alaska, we'd like to do our part and hopefully even do more than our part to help our nation achieve these goals if we can. So the plan that we will end up with, and I have some copies of the existing plan that was done in 1995, if you'd like to see these after, somewhere here on the desk, yes. If you'd like to see the existing plan that's in place, you can also get it online, of course, by searching Alaska Bike and Pedestrian Statewide Plan, and it'll pop up for you in a not too easy to read format, but you can pull it up quickly and at least read through the text. But this plan is going to be a policy document to define future goals, policies, and objectives for the state of Alaska. It'll create a framework of current facilities and the needs and approach for addressing gaps in our current system. And then the last bullet is particularly accountable, and it's a bit, particularly interesting, and it's new to these plans that we're creating now. There's accountability within the document that when we establish goals and policies, we actually have to go back and check on them and report to the Federal Highway Administration on the progress we're making at achieving these goals. So they're saying, we pay for the plan, but we really want to see that you're taking it seriously and you're actually implementing the plan and taking steps to get to your goals. So that's something new, and I think it's a very important piece of all of this. It's kind of like those New Year's resolutions that we establish, right? You don't go back and check them up. It's pretty easy to forget about them and then just make them again the following December. In this case, we're going to check up and make sure we're making progress. Yeah, what we're not going to include in the plan, and not to put too much of a negative spin on this, but we are not going to redo all the bike and pedestrian plans for all the communities that we know exist out there. We're at a 30,000-foot level, not a 1,000-foot level. We know that many of the communities have their own plans already in place. We want to fill in the gaps and be helpful. We don't want to go back and tell the city of Soldotna what their what bike and pedestrian plan should look like. They know best, and it's best done at a local level, but possibly we can help with connectivity on the Sterling Highway or other state DOT roadways, for instance. Goal also is not for this to be an advocacy cheerleading document about all of the things that we must do. We want to have a no-nonsense goals, policies that we're going to implement as we construct all of our projects. And some examples might be if we create a policy that when they're upgrading KGB or Seward Meridian, we'll have policy documents in there that tells them when we have to have separate pathways, how wide the shoulders need to be, how we're going to stripe bike lanes, etc. We've gone back and taken a look at a lot of documents that are out there, and a lot of them have chapters that are addressing pedestrian and bike usage. So we're not, the purpose of this slide is to remind me to tell you that we're not going to start from scratch here. We know there's been a lot of work done. We don't want to redo everything, but we are going to raise the bar and be more specific and more policy oriented on what we're expecting from our facilities from a bike and ped standpoint. We've reviewed relevant statewide and local plans, as I mentioned, looked at policies and strategies. We started capturing data of existing statewide facilities and pedestrian and bike networks. So trying to collect data and do an inventory of what we currently have as a starting place. And then we started through with the social media, these public outreach hearings, and public meetings, and we have a newsletter, and we're going to be using social media as we are here tonight to engage people and get comments and questions and feedback. Our schedule, in short, this whole process is 18 to 20 months in length. Some of the major items that we're starting with, we've got a public involvement and public outreach process that we're going through, that we're just starting here. In addition to the major communities in the state, we'll also be going to rural Alaska and to some of the hub communities around to get feedback in their area of the world as well. We have a steering committee that will meet several times through the course of the project. And then we'll have public meetings both now and then about halfway through and at the end of the process as we reach the draft plan stage. Data assembly, needs and demand analysis are major items, and then we'll get into the process of putting together the statewide network and the draft and final plan. So the public should get at least 2 more looks at the progress that we're making through the course of the next 20 months or so. So as we wrap up our question and answer here tonight, we have a small group so we can be a bit informal, but we'd like to pose some questions to you and talk a little bit about what you envision for future bicycle and pedestrian networks, both here in the Valley and elsewhere in the state. Talk to us a little bit about network needs maybe in rural Alaska, and then just some general policy questions. We talked last night in our public meeting about some states have implemented a 3-foot rule, so it's actually illegal to pass within 3 feet of a bicyclist or a pedestrian on the roadway. That's the minimum space that can be given. Washington and Oregon both passed those laws relatively recently. There are other examples of laws and legislative assistance that's been provided to kind of make that space in the right-of-way more comfortable for pedestrians and bicyclists. So if you have any ideas on policy direction, legislatively, legally, from an engineering standpoint, we can talk about those as well. So our team, I mentioned Marquita Moulton. She's with DOT in Juneau, and she's got a pretty easy email to remember. And then for Addison, for Renee, and for me, you see our contact information there as well. We do have a nice website that we're populating as we go along, akbikeped.com. It's up and some of the background information is there. As we prepare documents, they will be posted up there for you to see, including things like this presentation and the documents as we generate. So akbikeped.com. You can email our company at akbikeped@dowl.com. And I did want to mention that we will be doing additional outreach meetings. You know, the calendar is pretty full, so we have to schedule around everything else that's going on in various locations. And so we have these meetings today. We have a steering committee meeting tomorrow, and then we'll be down on the Kenai Peninsula in November to have a similar meeting to this. So maybe I'll just, as you start to formulate your feedback and thoughts, let me just give you a little bit of kind of some of the things that we've heard to date, because it might get you to thinking about what you want to kick in. We've heard that, first of all, I'd like to start off on the positive. There's a lot of excitement about what we're doing here. 21 years is a long time. This plan is really going to hopefully refresh our efforts and get us to a better place for bicyclists and pedestrians in the state. And so there's a great deal of excitement about what we're doing here. People want to be involved. Lots of people signing up for our mailing list and wanting to be on steering committees and those kind of things, which is terrific. A lot of comments about maintenance, what maintenance means, what maintenance levels should be. As you're probably aware, the state of Alaska is blessed to get a lot of funding relative to what we put into the Highway Trust Fund. We do very, very well. So we're blessed to get a lot of federal highway funding for building things, but maintenance has to come from Juneau. And we know that M&O is getting cut back all the time on staffing, and the level of maintenance for our roads and for our infrastructure is probably going to be hard to find. So we need to think that whole thing through and create priorities. So there's a lot of concern about maintenance, and people are already frustrated with the lack of maintenance, and they only see that potentially getting worse down the road. There's a snow storage, of course, is a big item. A lot of talk about sight lines at intersections. A little bit of concern that when we construct new facilities, we sometimes don't create adequate detours during construction for people to get around. I know I see that as a cyclist. They're redoing the Muldoon Glen Highway interchange, and sometimes the contractor doesn't provide a nice way to get through the construction zone for bicyclists and pedestrians. Concern about this turning into a Wasilla-Palmer Anchorage plan as opposed to a statewide plan. Rural communities want to make sure that they don't get shut out and forgotten, because this is a statewide plan. And we've got a lot of recommendations on specific projects that people wanted, and while we can take those comments and record them and pass them off to the right authorities, we don't want to step on the things that the communities are doing and already have planned in place, all the little networks and connections that we know are going on. And then just a couple other items. Will this really make a difference? It's kind of a cynical part of that question about, are we just here planning, or are we really going to have policies that we can enforce? And hopefully the accountability aspect that the feds are dropping on us will help us hold ourselves accountable. There's a discussion about funding. Where do we get the money for this? And how is it prioritized in the STIP, the statewide transportation improvement program? And then what is next? How can we be involved down the road? So those are some of the general comments we've heard to date. And that might whet your appetite a bit to fire away at us now. We don't have all the answers, but we'd like to record what questions, comments, concerns you have, so we can hopefully make sure we address the needs of this community. Sir?
How well has DOT followed the previous plan? For instance, do they have any general policy that when they make an artery or a major collector road, that they'll put a bike path in at the same time?
Let's see. To answer your first question, the bicycle and pedestrian plan done 20 years ago is, I don't mean to be critical of it, but I think the criteria for establishing the plan then was different than it is today. It's a little short on specifics.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So the question was, how well has DOT done it at following the existing plan that is in place, the 1995 plan? This plan is maybe a little bit different in its focus, in that it's not particularly strong on specifics and goals and specific policies, so much as it is maybe a loftier goal. So it's a little bit difficult to determine exactly, like if they've reduced accidents by 20%, the accident rate with bicycles and pedestrians or something. So I think in the plan that we're developing, it'll be much more metrics-based, and it'll be much more solid as far as policies and procedures related to arterials, highways, and collectors, and residential streets. So I don't mean to duck the question, but it's a little hard when the goal is soft to determine if they actually follow it. You know what I'm saying? Yes, ma'am.
So if I understand that correctly, okay, when you're finished with this plan, a person can depend on knowing that because a road is going to meet certain criteria, it will be expected it will include a pedestrian pathway or a bicycle pathway.
That's one possible outcome, right?
Only possible?
Well, I don't want to be presumptuous that that's where we're going to end up with all of our public involvement. I think that that would be a possible outcome of what we are going to generate here together.
But if it isn't that, then why, why are we, you explained about metrics and all the rest of it, how those would be what would kind of drive the expectation for pedestrian pathways and so on. Why is it not an expectation?
Well, it could be an expectation, although let me give you another scenario. So let's just say that the trade-off in a shrinking budget situation is either a well-maintained, planned surface next to the road, or it is a separated pathway that is unplowed and unmaintained.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that might be a trade-off that the public would say, I'd rather have a well-maintained next to the road than an unmaintained separated, and I don't know that that's the case. I'm just suggesting that we need to work through some of these things to ensure that we're building things we can maintain that are useful to us, not just 3 months of the year, but 12. Okay?
Okay, so the reason I'm being particular about it goes to that other statement you made about some people being cynical because of the other plan really not being implemented all along and so on. And that comes from the fact that we have at least a 25-year history. More than that? It's probably more than 25 years at this point, with repeated petitions, resolutions, and allocations of funding for a pedestrian pathway that we still don't have. So that's why. Is there something that's going to come out of this that's going to say you have to do a pedestrian pathway or not?
Yeah, I don't think I could answer that question because I think it would be premature for me to say that we are going to end up with a requirement for pedestrian pathways if the average daily traffic is more than 22,000 vehicles a day. I mean, that might be an outcome, but I want this to be a process-driven plan that we're putting together. Let's not jump to the end. Let's work through it and see where we end up, and then establish policies that make sense. I also want to clarify something you said. Also, you said that the plan wasn't followed. I hope I didn't say that. I'm saying that when the goal is when the goal is unmeasurable, it's not a metric. It's hard to determine if it was followed or not.
Okay, I may have misinterpreted that, but then why did you say that some people are cynical? You did say
Like,
that.
I did say that, yeah.
Yes,
I don't know what people were saying.
that's because the plan wasn't followed.
Yeah, and as long as you realize that I didn't say that the plan
Yeah.
wasn't followed. I said that the plan wasn't measurable,
Okay.
or as measurable as it could be.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I think that you have to go higher into the, whatever level is where they make decisions, and clue them in on, for example, that very picture that you have on that first slide for the purpose, you show that, you just, right there. We were told time and time again that you cannot do that in Fairview Loop. It has to be a separated pathway. We said, well, if we don't have the right of way, we have to condemn land, why don't we just make, instead of making 4 feet on each side, make 2 feet on one side and 6 feet on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And Amundsen and the, what's that guy's name? I know, he was the first guy, then the guy was dead. They always tell us, no, we can't do that. We were trying to be obliging and say, we don't have to have a separated pathway if the terrain and the landowners won't allow it. But they repeatedly give us this line that is trying to defeat that ever happening, which they've done. And it's not like there wasn't a plan to do it. It's like somebody up higher, and even when you talk to the people that are, we usually give these meetings, they never know about it. We said, well, who's doing this? And who goes to the legislature to rechange these?
Allocate our funding.
Yeah, and then I assume they weren't trying to lie, but things that they tell you for years, you find out are not true. Like the funding for that, I told you earlier, the Clap Fairview Loop intersection and extension of Fairview Loop there, how that money is now being used for the original money for Fairview Loop. And saying that we can't have the pedestrian pathway go next to the road. So either you ought to change that picture or change your presentation where you say, well, we'll try to do something either safe and financially feasible, whereas you said something about whether it's a separated pathway or along the road. We'd be happy with that. And right now, it's dangerous to go to your mailbox. And there's like 90 driveways on the Fairview Loop, 60 intersecting roads. And all they're gonna do is widen the road so that cars can go faster and soften the curves.
With no shoulder.
Right.
No, they're gonna put a shoulder.
2 feet, is it 2 feet or 3 feet on
I
each
don't
side?
know. No, they're going to put a shoulder.
But they won't put extra on one side.
I see. So you want to preserve right-of-way by going with a left-hand shoulder that would be minimal, and then widen the one on the right side.
That would
That
be,
was
if
a-
that's the least we could get, fine.
That's a possible suggestion. The objective is a pedestrian pathway on a very dangerous road, which we went twice with petitions and resolutions and everything, and got funding from the state, only to have DOT use it for something else.
So it's like you can have a plan, but if the powers that be up high do what they want, it doesn't, that's what makes people cynical.
I understand.
I know you didn't do it.
I wish. So I know Jim and Marquita is here also. If there's anything we can do to run down an answer to that, or maybe you have all your answers, but how that happens, I have no knowledge specifically of that. And I'm sure Marquita does.
We know how it
I
happened.
don't personally, but I would be happy to.
Oh, we know how it happened. It's not how it happened, it's the fact that it shouldn't happen.
Yes.
Also, part of his question was the higher up statement on, I believe what he was looking for was complete street methodology tied to federal funding. And at one point in time, I had pointed that out, I believe, to the TAP board, and I don't know if they passed a complete street policy, but the state of Alaska, using federal funds, there is a directive out there for a complete street approach. So that's the only teeth that I know about for pedestrian pathways. And I haven't seen the matrix for that, for the population standards, what dictates a pedestrian pathway.
But they only are required to abide by that if they take federal funds.
This is a state project.
So if the project is totally state funded, they don't have to do that.
Right.
Which is something else that should be in that plan.
But then,
Well, that's why you're here, and I'm glad you're here early. So I hope you realize that I have all of us are very excited about this. We're not here just to check a box and move on to something else. We all are residents of the state. We love the state. We're walkers, we're bicyclists, we have children. We want to be here and create a plan that makes the state better. And we want your input, but I hope you don't see us as somehow the people up here that are feeding you a line, and that we just want to check a box and move on.
No, I completely accept your comments about the.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm wondering, and I came in a little late, so I didn't catch the whole, but will there, or can we in this plan have more than one standard for bike paths? Like what they're talking about on Fairview Loop, where if it's state funded, you know, the standard could be maybe lesser than if it is a new road that's being built and there's going to be a lot of right-of-way acquisition, and you could have, you know, the separated path. And then even on, I mean, because there are still some state roads that are, it's hard to believe they're state roads. They're small, they're ditch to ditch, and when they get improved, they're probably not going to get improved to maybe not even that much. And so that's my question.
Right.
If
So-
we can have more than one standard, even for, maybe it's a different standard in the bush than it is in this area that
Right.
we're, you know, have 100,000 people in.
Right. So, for those of you on the social media, so the question was, will there be different standards for the roads and our approaches? And I think we will have different standards for roads and how they are classified as streets and highways. And then DOT also, and this came out of last night's discussion, DOT has something called a 1R project, where it's essentially a curb-to-curb project. The road is rutted. They're going to come in and shave off 2 inches of pavement and repave over the top. And so in that case, they're doing something there to enhance the safety for the motorized public, but they don't want to bite off right-of-way acquisition and separated pathways and all of that. So there's various levels of, we're just going to pave and stripe, we're going to reconstruct, which is typically called a 3R or 4R type project. And that's where we're changing the drainage, we're going in and maybe replacing the base, and you're working way back behind the curbs. And those would have a different set of policies of what needs to be constructed per our plan for pedestrian facilities and potentially for bicyclists as well, like adding shoulders, adding paved sidewalks, that'll be maintained in the winter. So yes, to the level of volumes and the characterization of the streets, and also depending upon what level of improvement is being done on the roadway as well, and whether the policy applies or not.
Do you anticipate that your plan will carry over to projects that are using state funds, like we just had $50-some million worth of borough bonds and it was matched by the state? Are you anticipating that any construction, even if it's a borough project, for instance, but there's state funds, that there will be something in the plan that says that bicyclists will be accommodated?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Marquita to answer that. I think that from the standpoint, this is not a federal, the document will not be for a federally funded project. It'll be a statewide DOT document. So the presumption would be that it will be followed for DOT projects regardless of the trail of funding. Now the question becomes, if the money is pushed to the borough, do they have the same requirements to follow these documents? And that I am not certain of.
We would hope that they would follow, you know, this is gonna be, we would hope they would take this into consideration. I don't believe that this plan is gonna be a dictatorship to tell people to where you will live. We want you to consider this, we want you to add some infrastructure. But again, the borough will have that decision. We're looking at this kind of as an umbrella plan for the state. And all the communities will fit underneath it, and we're hoping that things will feed up. And we can improve standards across the state for all projects. But it is not going to be a dictatorship that says if you don't do it our way, you can't.
But if you do follow this, or choose to as a tribal organization or a city or a borough, the possibilities or the likelihood of getting additional funding, federal funding, those chances will increase. Definitely.
Actually, the borough's transportation is more or less than
Than the current one.
Yes, in the current.
Right.
And that's what we're wanting to change with this
Yeah.
plan.
But I think the borough gets, you know, they get short of money and the road gets dour sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I was wondering if there were state funds, if it would have to be,
Right.
yeah.
I guess what our answer is that on projects done by DOT, we would expect that the policy would be followed. The question is, if somehow state money, well, if we ever have state money again, and they push it out to another entity, what will these same requirements tag along? I don't know if we can say that definitively. I would mention here that this, we talked a lot about the Glen and the parks and some of our major highways, and you know, we have pretty good paved shoulders on the parks all the way to Fairbanks. Maybe not completely continuous, but I've ridden much of that and pretty decent shoulders all the way. But on the Glen Highway, not so much. You know, once you get past Sutton, it's a hairy ride out there to climb up to Sheep Mountain Lodge. And there are segments that have been upgraded. We have shoulders, we have rumble strips, but there are also some sections that, you know, it's fog line and then gravel, essentially. So as we're upgrading, I do think we are currently making improvements in some of our national highway system roads with paved shoulders, with rumble strips, and with 5 and 6 foot wide paved surfaces. And sometimes they're not swept as much as we would like, so there's glass and there's melted tires and other things out there. But you know, that's maybe another M&O issue, right?
It's good to be able to reach the national system though,
Yes, it is.
without having to take your truck and carry the bicycle to the national.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I represent myself. I follow the public process. The public process does strictly decision made by the governing body is more like the public interest. Now, you're holding a public meeting. I couldn't help but notice. I got an email from Mail Lakes Community Council, although I'm not a member of Mail Lakes, today noting about this meeting. One part of my question will be, but I have some comments and concerns, is when did you, where and when and what time did you put this notice out to when? To the public. And second is, I saw the narrow communication that said meeting from 5 to 7. With all due respect, there's over 100,000 people that live in the Matthews Borough. To hold a meeting at 5 o'clock to 7 window, when the core of the valley commutes between Anchorage and the valley, and earn their bread and butter, that's totally disrespectful. Okay, and second is, you obviously did not plan many people here because you're holding this meeting in a much smaller room. Enough for the people that attended, with this acoustic scenario where it's hard for people to hear. Also, when people are speaking, they should identify who's speaking and who they are. You know, this is totally out of line, and I couldn't help but notice, and off the public process is that just you're talking about pedestrians and all that stuff. I was in this building when they passed. Had a plan to do this Bogart scenario the next group. And I saw the plan of the roundabouts thing, and I said I was concerned about the roundabouts and how those children going to be crossing, pedestrians going to be crossing over. That's a total nightmare waiting for someone to be killed. Someone's going to get killed sooner or later because this is bad. So you're talking about they can't even do that. Okay, and I go, by the way, for a footnote on my background, I'm not asking for back to the 70s. I was a resident in Anchorage many years ago when Anchorage adopted the Comprehensive Foot Trails Plan. I go back many decades, I have a lot of information, but forget what I know. My role has been is to connect government with the people so that you're more likely going to get your decisions more likely in the public interest. And I've yet to see a state agency that has been following the open meetings law. And on one little reference, and last comment in reference to this scenario, is some of the agency boards, commissions I've witnessed putting out notice has lines that says, the public cannot criticize or attack. So what's the opposite of criticism? Compliment. So state agencies that exist today are telling people you can only compliment. And that's why we're in this sham, with all due respect.
So, Addison, would you talk a little bit about how the this meeting was advertised? There's, I think we've got 7 or 8 questions in there, so maybe we'll start with how this was advertised and how we tried to launch our outreach and select a location that would be easiest for people to attend.
Oh, okay. So one of the first steps that we did was to develop a public involvement plan in accordance to the State of Alaska's Transportation Administrative Code. Through that public involvement plan, we identified specific communities that we would have meetings in, and we also identified a public and steering committee contact list. The steering committee contact list and the public contact list was developed based off of some of our contacts that we received through the Mat-Su Borough, the Assembly, the local governments, local officials, and different projects that we've worked on through DOT's contact list and through DOWL. The public notice was sent out to the contact list, including folks at the Mat-Su Borough, folks within the school districts, the transit, Mat-Su Transit, and different contacts out here about 2 weeks ago. The event was also posted on the Department of Transportation's public Facebook page. We did provide Jessica Smith at the Mat-Su Borough with the information, which was distributed through the borough's website and through their Facebook page. So did that?
No, you didn't give a specific date when you did it on the state website.
I would
the
have
state
to.
Agency. Also, in reference to that contact list, the public shouldn't be discriminated by an exclusive party who says, I want to be noted in case you have something in the future. A general notice to the public is supposed to go out there, and a reasonable opportunity for the public to be heard. This exclusive party, and because I've been attending a number of meetings, and one particular one is the Borough Transportation Advisory Board, about roughly a year ago, there used to be a situation where notices from the borough were sent out to a lot of people who wanted to get it. But what they did was they cut that stuff for notices to limit it to basically members of the community, members of the board. So we don't see that, even though we want to see that. So this exclusive list, special list to be on this list is totally out of line. Social network is totally out of line. The idea is these state notices, state websites or whatever, you need to prove yourself, and you still didn't answer, when did you go on the state website? And was this in an ad in the Frontiersman? And when?
Emma, do you have an exact date of when that was posted? Another method that we used was to develop the website. Once we had the website going, we distributed our notification that we were kickstarting the project. We have been under contract for a little over a month.
So maybe we can grab all of your comments into, I assure you that there is not some sort of a motive here to silence the public. We selected.
I've been following this for years, and this has been continued practice. I'm reminding you to stop doing this stuff. I've asked you when these dates are. You should know those dates. When it wasn't Frontiers and when it was on the website, with all due respect.
We will get you those dates.
You should have it here for these people to witness what kind of time frame you need to put the notice for the meeting. It's you're meeting with the public.
It was on the 12th.
What?
It was on the 12th.
Where?
It was on the online calendar for the Frontier.
On the online calendar for the Frontiers.
Is that the day we also sent out the
So-
flag?
But no display ad or anything like that.
So maybe if you have, it sounds like you have suggestions on how.
Look, I've addressed your representatives, the state's transportation, are pretty much regulars at the Rural Transportation Advisory Board, which is one of the bodies that they want to eliminate, okay? They want to eliminate, for those who are not aware of it, there's an ordinance public hearing that went last night to try to change the way things are going there. I put a copy and handed it out to a party over there, he's taking notes. But the thing is that things have not changed, they've only gotten worse. And people, you can't blind these people to the scenario.
So it's difficult for me to answer your comments if you continue to interrupt me when I'm trying to respond. So I tried to listen to you, and I can tell that you are passionate about the fact that we have not done an adequate job of outreach to the people in the valley. If you have suggestions, we will do our best to address them. And there is no motive here to silence the public, and in fact, we have done everything we could. We thought we had done everything we could to invite people in and be part of this process. We felt that we would have up to 40 to 50 people, and we selected this location. We selected this location because it was off of Trunk Road. We selected the time. I think you bring up a good point on the time. You bring up a good point on the time. We often get comments that people want to stop on these meetings on their way home from work, not go home and eat and come back. So if we should change our approach of either making this easy for people to stop on their way and do something different, we would love to hear that.
My comments are not new, and I'll give you an example. LNG that's going around the state, I've told them don't hold on Tuesday nights and Monday nights. They continued to. The Kena one was held Tuesday night, Borough Assembly meeting. They know better. It's not like they haven't heard this. From some members of the board who ignore this stuff.
Excuse me, thank you
Goodbye.
so much for your comments.
Yeah, you ignore it.
And we're sidetracking a little bit on the focus
No,
of
the
our
point
meeting.
is, how do you expect to hear from public comment if you don't connect the people so they can attend these meetings and know what it's about?
Well, we'll take your comments into consideration to look at further outreach.
And where's the record of these comments? You say you take the comments, you're gonna take notes. The fact is, you should have an accounting of what's said here, so people know what was
We
said.
will post
We
on
are
our
recording.
website as soon as we're done with this meeting within the next few days.
If
So
they're
thank
taking
you.
notes,
We need to
I was
move
the only
forward
one that
with-
recognized my name. How do you take notes? How do you take notes of who said what and what they represent?
We have people that have signed in on their way in, and the group is small enough that we're able to attach comments to individuals.
I was the first one for several minutes to state my name. No one else did. And I'll add footnote of how things are done. LNG, when they had a deal,
Sir?
they espoused, they said on the record, the LNG record, that they would get rid of the names of people who they are and what they do, and only the comments. That's wrong.
So I will chat with you about this after we're done.
Only
with
on
this.
the record and public meeting and taped.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay, so my name is Marion Elliott.
Hi, Marion.
I'm with the Fairview Loop Safety Committee. And I was going to ask you, when you said that you're all about having public feedback, what you were looking for from that feedback. And I heard you say, and I know that sometimes I don't get it exactly right, but I think I heard you say something about not wanting feedback on specific projects. Is that close to something you said?
We will take feedback on specific projects in your neighborhood, and we will pass those on to the appropriate authorities on a local level. Because we're looking statewide, we're going to be at a little bit higher level than that and focused on policy and on improving the facilities on the highway systems that connect our communities, not the specific projects in our communities.
Okay, so in making those decisions, you are trying to be informed as far as where the public stands on their, okay, which brings me to, I have a 25-year history of an attempt to get a pedestrian pathway. I would like to send you copies of that, resolutions, letters, petitions, letters from legislators, the whole picture. So you can see the kind of struggle that has gone on to try to get safety for pedestrians on every route. Is that the
That
kind
would
of
be very
feedback
helpful.
you're looking for?
That would be very helpful. Because that would speak to the fact that through the STIP process, through the nomination, through the grassroots efforts, there's blockages in the system that don't allow projects to be advanced.
Right,
And
absolutely.
that's the kind of stuff that should go in our plan, is that the public feels disenfranchised because they put all this time and effort into getting these projects launched. I think they have it at the half-yard line, and suddenly the field gets 30 yards longer.
Right,
Right.
exactly. You summed it up perfectly,
Yes, sir.
which is the cynical part.
Okay. So from a network standpoint, any kind of comments on future pedestrian networks, major gaps in our system, things we don't consider, particularly from a pedestrian and bike standpoint? Yes.
Well, in the network, so take the community, are you, first of all, just hooking up all the major artery roads? That would be just without even doing this number 5, demand and needs, like the major roads, Palmer, Wasilla, those would all be in there to begin with, correct?
Those would be front center for
Okay.
a statewide plan, right?
So then if you have the next step down rows that connect those together, and you say, yes, that's gonna be included in this network, well, would the needs and making it a high need and demand, what would make one more needy than the next? An arterial road, how would you judge that? Or how would people put their comments on what's needed more than something else?
So if there was a documented safety issue on the roadway,
Okay.
if there were schools or commercial districts where maybe a lot of short trips are generated, if there was an atmosphere that was conducive and we had head and bike counts that showed that there was a higher than normal usage of that area, those would be the things that we would want to really elevate that in the plan.
Population,
Potentially population.
but, oh, that was not so high on it.
Well, I think population would certainly be part of it, and that would come out of the counts. We wouldn't want, I don't think that we would want to have that be the only thing, because that would really put an undue burden on our rural communities, because they don't have the population base to justify.
Well, I just mean within the community, trying to judge putting a bike path where you have a whole lot more population with no pathway
Right.
as opposed.
Right.
Okay. So how do we put our comments on that? On what the basic grid would look like?
Right. Addison, would you kind of talk a little bit about how you want the comments to be documented, either on the maps that are on the
Yeah,
table, or?
so what we want to do is take some comments that we're receiving on Facebook, because we are live streaming this and we've advertised this on DOWL's account, DOT's account. So we have several comments that we've received, and we'd like to talk, I'll mention the comments and have Stuart respond to those. And then we are going to end the presentation, and we'd like to break out and have discussions with you at the tables. So does that work for you,
That
Stuart?
works fine.
Okay. So, and I apologize to those that are on Facebook if I mispronounced your name. We have one of our first comments from Paul McGuire. I sent DOT a message about Palmer and considering people who are wheelchair users, racing sport power, mobility diverse, people who experience CPMS, etc. Our efforts should be more inclusive, being cyclists, all-wheelers, and PEDs, mobility challenged. So beyond cyclists. Thank you, Paul. Another comment from Paul, he said that also communicated quite a bit with DOT to have state fair contractor keep the signs and candle cones off to dirt side of breakdown lane on Glen during fair. Object failure. Law requires accommodation of non-motorized. I have photos, had a bike trailer and had to stop about a dozen times on round trip from home near Kepler to Palmer on both sides. FYI, won't cross rumble strip and go on highway anytime, but especially during fair traffic. Heather Campfield provided us with a comment. With decreasing funding for DOT&PF maintenance and state troopers, what is the plan for maintenance of separated pathways, surface conditions, and also clearing of gravel and debris? And what is the plan to keep ATVs off the pathways out here in the valley? These are huge issues. These are two of many reasons why bicyclists choose to ride on the shoulder of roads.
I think that's a more than a question, that's a comment, and I know that I've experienced that as well. The trail from Butte to Palmer suffers that, and the trail along the Parks Highway, also north of Wasilla, has a lot of ATV traffic that kicks gravel onto it, makes it unrideable on a road bike. And they're rarely swept. And you don't have the trucks with the streamlines that are blowing the shoulders clear like you do on the road. So it is a significant issue.
Paul McGuire commented on that comment. Absolutely, debris from granite is horrible. From the main entrance and 3 to 4 miles either way, really bad. I've written to DOT with no response, took phone numbers off truck and called. So that's another comment.
I think that is one area that we need to investigate with M&O is exactly if they sweep the main highways at all, or if they just rely again on largely on truck traffic and RVs to kind of blow them clear. One of the things you notice with road cyclists is we have a fog line, a rumble strip, and then we've got 6 feet of shoulder, and the cyclists usually like to ride right along the rumble strip. And the reason is because that's the best place to ride from a flat standpoint. The glass has been blown off. The further you get off of the traveled way, the more debris you have on the shoulder. And I'm sure motorists that don't ride are constantly thinking, why doesn't that cyclist get over? The reason is because they don't like returning flats. So yeah, sweeping, I think, and maintenance overall is a big issue.
Thank you for your comments, Paul. Albert Spencer, his comment, many people use the right-of-ways in the more rural areas, particularly up the Glen and Parks, for the use of ATVs, snow machines, and mushing. What considerations are being considered when planning in the areas where shared use is unavoidable and will no doubt cause conflicts?
Markia, you want to talk a little bit about DOT's policy on use of the right-of-way for motorized traffic, and then relative to particularly paved pedestrian ways? What is DOT's current position on that?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that. I don't believe that unless it's marked as pathway or a bikeway, that motorized traffic is allowed on the right-hand side of the white line. However, I would have to get back to you and provide you that answer.
Because certainly there is a fair amount of equestrian use and mushing, snow machine, ATV. Kind of how that all fits in with pedestrian and bike use is probably an issue we need to address as part of our plan.
Now, I know that the pedestrian pathway and bicycle pathway on Nichols Bay Road is prohibited to motorized vehicles. And I don't see any sign. Did you say if there's a sign?
I'm not aware.
Oh, okay.
But I think generally, speaking, that motorized vehicles other than cars should not be on the right side of that white line. Wheelchairs, walkers, and usually it's a bikeway, and you'll see the painted white bike with the arrow that clearly identifies. But I will get clarification into that and make sure that when we put it in
we just have one more from Paul McGuire. Thank you for this option, the Facebook option. He's learned a lot. So that wraps it up.
And I'm sorry, Allison, did we get other campus?
Yes, we did.
We did,
Yeah.
okay.
I think it was a comment phrased as a question, which is, she was pointing out, what are we gonna do about the gravel that gets spit up on the paved roadway or the paved pathway, et cetera? And where we have competing or incompatible uses between equestrians, snow machines, et cetera, sometimes it diminishes the non-motorized space.
All right. So I think that wraps it up.
So, yes. Oh, yes.
So Stuart, I might have missed this part of the discussion, but I was curious, this being a statewide plan, what is the strategy for engaging people in rural Alaska? By rural Alaska, I mean places like Nome or Bethel, or, you know, where the culture may or may not, you know, be thinking about bicycles and pedestrian networks. What's this plan gonna do to try to get inputs from those parts of the state?
I'm going to let Addison, I'm just going to give a brief introduction, but she is the most passionate person I know about making certain that we consider the needs of rural Alaskans in these plans that we are doing. And so Addison has a detailed plan of outreach to the hub communities and the smaller communities out there that are just, you know, people are walking from the airport back to town.
So, like Stuart said, I've been working in rural Alaska for over 8 years, and he's absolutely right. I'm very passionate about advocating for tribes and rural communities that don't use vehicles as their main mode of transportation. And so it's a large component of this plan. One of the first things that we're doing is we've invited Alaska Federation of Natives and also the Alaska Native Settlement Claims Act of Corporations to sit on our steering committee to help us with advising us on our rural outreach plan. We're also going to be working, we have 4 or 5 communities that we're going to be going out and having public meetings in. And the outreach efforts to make sure that we're consulting with the tribal governments, the municipalities, and the different local governments in the area is to work through the tribal organizations and also contact the tribal entities within the communities. We have several contacts and relationships in the communities that we'll be working in. We plan to use a representative in those communities to help us conduct outreach through the surrounding villages. So if that means doing some translation when we go out to Western Alaska or up north, that's something that we'll have conversations with DOT if that's needed. So we're definitely considering that component.
And Addison, we do have meetings scheduled, remind me again, in Nome, Dillingham,
Barrow,
Bethel,
Soldotna, yeah,
And Juneau.
and Juneau.
And Fairbanks. Yeah.
So we'll get to the hub communities, and then I think also we need to make sure that we're addressing the concerns either at providers conferences or at Alaska Federation of Natives about the needs of villages as well, because it is statewide, as you mentioned.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely be using the public service announcements, and through the tribal organizations, they have, most of the communities and surrounding villages use fax machines, so that's a method that we're going to be doing to provide outreach. And some organizations will be having forums, so folks can just call in from their communities and participate in the discussions. The hub communities are really important, and they're the lifeline of some of those surrounding villages. So we're making sure we're not just hitting Bethel, but there's 56 villages in that region that depend on Bethel's network. And we know that there's a lot of stuff going on in Bethel, and it's going to be critical for us to conduct outreach to those communities. And in addition, I think the engagement for the Alaska Federation of Natives and the ANCSA corporations will be really useful for our plan and making sure this is not just an Anchorage, Fairbanks, Mat-Su plan. So we're really excited, and we have relationships with existing village representatives and corporations.
Yes.
A suggestion. I think you ought to do outreach to DOT that in large part they're engineers, they build roads. And I think that they need to start thinking about pedestrians more so. This is my experience, Dan Elliott, with the Transportation Advisory Board, and I got an email. I didn't see it in the frontiersman, so in some ways, Eugene is right, that the outreach misses an awful lot of people. But I'm serious about the DOT, that when it comes down to what they want to do, they do what they want to do, whether it's those 80-foot tower lights, even though you're going through suburban neighborhoods, shining into the windows, they do what they want to do. Or like in the case of Fairview Loop again, where I have to drive 2 driveways to get my mail because it's so dangerous to walk. They determine what available money they'll use to fix up the road and not take care of the passengers. So I'm serious. They need to kind of change their attitude. And that's something that would be good in your plan.
I think I do want to say that we have brought in folks on the engineering side that are instrumental in making design decisions so that they know what's in this policy document and what standard we will be held to as we construct things going forward. So some of the decision makers, you mentioned Jim Amundsen and others, we're going to invite them into the overall process too, so that the plan actually gets implemented. Because the plan doesn't mean anything if it just goes on the shelf. We keep doing things the same way we've been doing them.
And I do think that, that there are a number of examples in the valley that make you proud to be in the valley. Like for instance, that new flat road, Mac Drive, that's a beautiful road. Same with Trunk Road. It makes you proud to be there.
Right.
But then when you realize you can't get there without driving your truck, carrying your bicycle, then it doesn't do you too much good.
Right. And I appreciate you saying that because I've been in Alaska for 26 years and spent most of my career here, and this is a much different town, region, state than it was when I arrived. And we are making progress, and I know some of us are frustrated maybe at the rate of progress we are making, but there are some good examples of things that we're doing right. We just want more of them. I've always been a half full guy, and I think that when you ride around, you see a lot of examples of good things. We just need to do more of it. Yes?
You mentioned, somebody asked about funding, and I didn't catch who resurrected this, or with all the budget cuts, how come all of a sudden this group is coming back to life? How is that possible?
It's funded by the Federal Highway Administration. We are very fortunate to have the formula that we do to help us fund our infrastructure improvements.
But where did from whom did the decision come to get the federal highway funds to do it?
That would be through federal requirements in our long-range planning.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Okay, like, so it's been so many years.
And this money was actually awarded to us several years ago, and trying to write a scope for the state of Alaska, where we are so diverse and vast. It took a team, took an army, and so we finally are happy to be at this point where we can come out and talk to our.
So it's Alaska DOT that's federally funded?
Correct.
For this project.
This project to write the statewide bicycle pedestrian plan is federally funded, right, and the state.
And DOT is running this program?
Correct.
And that's the way it works in every state in the union.
Especially one where the state doesn't have any money itself.
Right.
DOT engineers told me they don't want federal funding for bike paths because it slows down projects. I haven't seen DOT do anything. Yeah, so DOT's basically spending money that they've been given federally. It's not, doesn't sound like it's out of the goodwill of the people. It sounds like they are spending money that's been allocated because they have to. It does, I mean, I'm not even sure anything will come out of it in the end, except for there'll be a plan. I'm hopeful, but.
Well, as a project manager, I'll just throw in my 2 cents worth. resident of Alaska, and I've been a resident since I was 5 years old. I'm an avid biker, I'm an avid walker, I'm an avid hiker. And time changes, things evolve. We have done many wonderful things for Bike and Bed. And this plan is finally, after 21 years, being allowed to be updated. And we want to engage the public to make sure that we're going to do things that we want to see happen that's within the federal guidelines.
Well, I gotta agree with this gentleman here also that I don't know. I didn't hear about this till last night. This should have been on the radio. It should have gone to hikers and bikers groups. It went to government officials. That's not telling the public.
It did go on radio.
Mhm.
It did go out to various hiker and biker groups.
Yeah.
And individuals that
I
signed up.
emailed some people while I was sitting here tonight. Nobody had heard a thing about it. Deer Valley Bikers and Hikers, the people I contacted. I'm
Certainly
just
can
shocked.
provide you the public development plan of all the radio stations that we did list, all the bursts that we paid for, the advertisements in the paper, and.
Well, where's the papers? Well, they're online. I looked this morning.
No, we
Tomorrow's
don't.
transportation affairs on.
Yeah, and this isn't the
That's
only
what
time
I'm-
that we're gonna engage,
Yeah, this
the
isn't
folks
the
out
only
here.
time.
I mean, we plan to have a very, I would guess, or I would say, no matter where we're at, having meetings, having discussions, we're gonna be able to have the folks call in if they need to, or we can do additional outreach. We will have an online open house at the end of this process, so the draft, will be available for folks to view and provide us with important feedback. And then we have these several meetings planned throughout the next 18 months. So folks will also be able to call in or participate in those.
And this gentleman's expectation.
I just had another general
Sure.
question. I might have missed the discussion. It looked like in the handout here that there was some mention that so far there's been some study of plans from other states. And it seems like we're kind of just getting started here in Alaska. We have our own, obviously, our own unique types of challenges here. I'm just curious, in this study, have you got a sense of how other states are doing? Who's had theirs the longest? How's it going? I mean,
Right. Let me just,
is there, you know?
so we, the firm Alta, we chose them as a teaming partner specifically because they've done work nationally and internationally in northern climates, in the Canadian provinces, in Finland and Sweden, in the northern tier states, and put plans like this together. And then they also have a design group that actually designs improvements for winter cities. So we recruited them to join our team over 2 years ago in anticipation of this project coming out. And they will be helping us take the experience that they have on a national level, dropping it into Alaska and Alaskanizing it, site adapting it, so that we hopefully come up with the very best ideas that are Alaskan ideas, but that bring in the best thought processes from around the globe, particularly in the winter cities area. This last year, I traveled to Minneapolis. Minneapolis hosted the, believe it or not, was a Winter Cities biking conference. And there was about 300 people there, again, from all over the world, talking about winter biking and sharing ideas. And I was able to give a little presentation on Alaska and on flat tire biking. And believe it or not, we're still a novelty in that respect, but really a group that's really dealing with winter cities and pedestrian and bike-friendly environments. So we have a very good resource here in Alta to help us bring in the best ideas, state of the practice, if you will. Oh, yes, please.
Just, we are in line with all states in the United States. There's a handful, maybe 5 or 6, that actually have updated plans that are like five years, in the last 5 years they've been updated. A lot of states are in the same process we are. They're working at developing the scope for their plans. What I've seen a lot of is it's either a bike plan or a pedestrian plan. There aren't a lot of combined ones. So we're not the last, but we're not the first. We're right there with that major group of states that are ready
Yes, sir.
Short question, two parts. Number one is, you said that it's federal funding, and it was a, what, grant awarded to the state to run it? Am I misunderstanding this? I thought I heard you getting federal funding to do this.
It is federal funding, but it's not through a grant program.
What was it through?
I believe it was through the Federal Highways Administration allocation for, through STP funding for.
But to award funds, number one is how much money was awarded? And number two, what was the criteria that the feds have for you to do what you're doing? Thank you.
I'll have to address that question when I get back to the office. I don't have those answers right here with me.
Well,
but I would love to provide
again,
them.
kind of questions I'm asking for is for you being running the show. You would think you would know the information you would have here.
So the amount of money allocated for the study is in the neighborhood of 400,000. I don't have the exact dollar figure, but
For the whole state?
it's about 400,000.
For the whole state?
Our contract is for about 400,000 for the statewide plan, right?
And how many communities?
That's for a
It's for the statewide plan.
But when you say statewide plan, how many communities are you gonna have programs such as this?
It's one community, the state of Alaska. We're forming a plan for the community of the state of Alaska.
Unless you're misunderstanding, is you having a public meeting here, you had a public meeting in Anchorage, you had a public
There's
meeting.
nine.
There's 9 separate public meetings, but we are doing a lot more than having public meetings with the amount of money that's allocated. There's an outreach component, and there's a plan component, and an inventory.
Okay.
Okay. And you had a second part to your question. Was it so the amount of it? Yes. It's so the state of Alaska gets money from the Federal Highway Administration based upon gas tax, and we get somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $6 for every dollar we put in. That money comes back to the state of Alaska, and it's used for all kinds of things, of constructing facilities, of maintaining facilities, of paving facilities. And so included in that overall amount of money that flows back to the state of Alaska was a carve-out for this bike and ped plan. So it wasn't a specific grant, it's part of the allocation that came to DOT.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stuart.
Other questions or comments? We would like to have some one-on-one discussions with folks and talk about some of the questions that have been, that we have posed about missing portions of the network. Where did I go here? About policy decisions for pedestrians and bikes, things that we ought to be focusing on as we move forward. Is there anything from we've talked a lot about the engineering and the design side. We've talked about the allocation of funds and losing funds for certain projects that are high priorities. Is there anything legislatively or legally that we could change to make, whether it's speed limits, it's 3-foot rules, it's, legislatively requiring separate bike paths on certain roadways? Do you have any thoughts there? Anything you've seen in your travels, or anything that we're doing well here in Alaska that we ought to keep doing?
I believe that that national organization that you indicated out would be able to provide recommendations on different policies within different states depending on our needs. And I think that'll come out later on in the study.
Right. One of the things that's being tested in Anchorage, the first location in Alaska that we're doing this is, if you, from a cycling standpoint, actuated signals, you don't get actuation of the signals on a bike. So to pull up to the white stop bar, there's not enough metal in the bike that trips the loop to give you the green light. And so you see these in cities outside, but we actually have detection devices now for bicycles in a couple of the intersections in Anchorage to see if we can get them to work in a northern black environment like ours. That's a biking example. We see, pedestrian facilities with refuge islands. That's one of the things that's really caught on. So if you have big wide highways, if you have enough space in the middle so that if someone is traveling at a slow speed or they're in a wheelchair, that they can cross halfway and rest, and then push another button to get across the rest of the way.
Stuart,
Yeah.
I'll just pop in there. My name's Renee. I'm the lead planner on the project. So I've lived in Alaska now for a year. I've also worked in transportation in London and England, and also in New Zealand, which is where I'm originally from. In terms of the work that we're doing with Alta, part of what we're looking at is a demographic analysis. We're seeking to understand the population of the state and what their needs are, and also their activity levels. And we're also seeking to do a health impact assessment so as we can look at creating more active communities and communities that are more inclined to use non-motorized transportation year-round. So Alta are an integral part of doing those studies. I've been in quite a lot of discussions with them about gathering the baseline information. They have good knowledge from the states of Washington, Oregon, Minnesota, Carolina, and throughout the US, but those are outstanding examples that they're going to bring that knowledge to us, and we're going to seek to do best practice for Alaska.
We do have transit folks also that will be working with us, because we realize that all trips start with pedestrian movements typically, right? You just pop our fingers and end up in the car or whatever, so we have the transit folks that are going to be working with us as well to address the special needs of transit riders. Yes, ma'am?
Just a comment, when a new traffic pattern is implemented, and with traffic, I'm talking about non-motorized, it would be useful to give some education at the time. Like we're used to pedestrians and bikes being in the bike path, and then the cars over on the road. With some new stuff here in Palmer, they stuck and I know why they did it. The bike path goes between the traffic and what used to be the bike path, which I think is now just pedestrian. And I think it's because of the breaking up turn. That puts people who are going straight with their bikes don't have to deal with breaking up people turning right.
Yes. Right.
But it was just strange the first time I saw it. I was just running. I'm like, what's this? And just having a little bit of a heads up ahead of time.
New traffic patterns.
Like you did with
right?
roundabouts.
Like, yeah.
Tell us how to use roundabouts. Yeah, same type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that sometimes during construction, we have examples where we don't adequately consider the needs of non-motorized users of the right of way. Sometimes, it'll just say sidewalk closed. Well, what am I supposed to do now? Am I out on the road or, bushwhacking or what? So I think we've heard that from several commenters last night that we need to do a better job of accommodating them during construction. I hate those sidewalk closed signs. They always seem so. Oh, sure. Yes.
Are you guys going to have a presence at all at the transportation?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we have a table, the DOT has a table tomorrow, and we have all of our information. And then we are also planning to possibly come back out next year when we have more information to share with the public, so yeah.
Both the maps in Anchorage and Fairbanks.
Other thoughts or comments? So I guess in summary here, I hear that there's some frustrations that our outreach was not as encompassing as it could have been. And I know that there's some thoughts that was by design, and I can assure you that that's not the case. I certainly don't want to take my evening, come out here and not grab everybody we possibly can and talk about the project. So we will expand and do a more thorough job of reaching out to everybody who will listen in every community that we travel to and some that don't. And we'll use social media and try to get people engaged at the maximum possible level. So that was one of the things I heard. I understand also there's some frustrations about commitments that were made that are reneged upon based on after a lot of work by the public to get things advanced. And if you give me, I'll take your name, and if there's anything that I can do, I will ask the question at least about what happened, and at least you'll be able to compare stories based on what was told to me and what you already know.
I thought of another suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Is that when DOT is planning a project, quite often we hear, well, we don't have enough money to do all of this. And what I've said to them in the past is, when you improve the road, only spend as much money as you have working on that section of road that also has a pedestrian pathway, then stop the improvement. Instead of increasing the traffic and the speeds, and then forgetting the public, the pedestrian public. It never happens then.
So shorten the segment and do it right, as opposed to lengthening it and.
And it's much easier to get money then to finish the segment than it is to put it through and then like Fairview Loop thing, 2019 supposedly, where you get 2 miles for $24 million.
Right.
And that kind of goes back to what he was talking about with what we see as DOT's focus. And this is based on specific statements that have been made, not just, some assumption. That the focus is for people who are driving cars. In fact, when we talked about the transportation plan, talking about quality of life for road users, and I pointed out how the quality of life of the people who live on the road is diminished by not being able to walk to their mailbox because you've increased the speed of the traffic and the traffic on the road. He said, oh, but our concern is for the driver. So to his point, if you are saying, well, you're going to do the road with both the driver and the pedestrian considered, then you look at it differently. So
Especially when you got the money because the pedestrians asked for it.
So we, twice going to my mailbox, walking, there was almost an accident because I have to go, the mailbox is on a road that goes off a curve, okay? So I'm coming back from the mailbox and here comes the school bus. And I know there's a car coming down the other road and that school bus is gonna pull out right at that curve and that car is not going to know it and the school bus is not going to know it. So my choice is to jump in the ditch, which is full of water. This is the situation we deal with regularly, all the time.
The post office won't deliver mail to
On the
your
road
on your
because
driveway.
it's
It's too
dangerous.
So now you gotta walk to a corner someplace where there's an intersection, and they got the boxes off on the side, but they don't explain how you get there. Anyway, that's.
Yeah, we could keep you here all night. I guess we should go.
Well, I ride with the cycling community out here, and we actually like your street because it has all the curves in it.
I know, but we see there was a whole train of them, and there they are, enjoying our road. But you see what I'm saying about pedestrians? And I can't take my bicycle out there.
Right.
Not only is it too dangerous, I have to put up with all kinds of grief. I mean, cars deliberately acting like they're gonna come right at me and push me off the road and veering off at the last minute. That's what it's like.
Drunks
And my
like
son
to use
used
the
to-
road because the cops are on KGB, the parks.
Right.
They'll
Big
take
mirrors,
they'll take
way out.
Vine and they'll take Fairview Loop.
Yeah.
Anyway. Thank you.
Will you be making any recommendations to DOT before May of 2018? That's the end of your schedule for collecting data and whatnot. But would you, if you at that point realize, hey, here's a critical project, and it's coming up, we really need to, would you advise or?
Well, certainly the DOT people will know of the progress that we've made in our plan. It will be signed by FHWA and by the Commissioner of DOT at the end, and then it will become official policy. Whether they'll take some of the ideas that we have earlier than when it becomes policy, I'm not certain.
Who is the commissioner now? I'm not sure.
Commissioner,
It's
yeah,
still-
Mark Lucan.
this was-
Mhm. Great, well, I'm gonna go talk to this gentleman about.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to all of those on Facebook. We appreciate your comments. Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah.
If you need anyone else on the steering committee that is extremely